we listened to a podcast.
Jay Klaus and Dr. K.
They had a really good conversation that I feel like tied into this. They were really talking about creator burnout overarchingly. And one of the things that they talked about in their discussion was how we respond to our content when we put it out. When we create a good piece of content, oftentimes we'll attribute it to luck. We put out a good video and it's like, wow, the algorithm took off and it just happened to work really well. But then when we put out a piece of content that's bad, we oftentimes say, man, I wish I could have done better.
Yeah.
Like, what did I do wrong? How can I improve? And we put the blame on ourselves. I just thought that was a really interesting thing where when something good happens, we rarely fully take credit for it. But when something bad happens, we nearly always want to take credit for it.
Welcome back to the Creative Files podcast. I'm your host, Julia, and my co-host, Nathan.
Hey.
So people talk a lot about getting serious on YouTube, how if you aren't serious, you aren't going to make it. And there's a lot of truth to that. But we also think that mindset can be hurting you in some ways. There's this interesting battle sometimes between being serious and being creative. To be creative, you do have to be somewhat serious. They aren't totally like opposing things, but sometimes they can hurt each other. And we've been consuming a lot of content lately about creativity, and we just have so many thoughts about this. So hopefully this is really helpful. I think it's really changing the way we think about things.
Yeah, and I think it's not just an intellectual thought at this point. Like there are things we're actually sort of implementing at this point to help ourselves, I guess, be a little bit more creative. We've talked a little bit about adding some soul into our videos, and I think that makes a really big difference. It feels like there's sort of this shift in the industry. There's a lot of creators talking about this idea of being more creative and being more, just interested and engaged in your content and just focusing less on the outcome of the content.
Yeah, I think I have in the past shied away from even learning much about creativity, because when you hear that, it sounds like something that is subjective. Mm-hmm. And, how do you build that skill? I think so many people have the misconception, myself included, have for a long time, that it's kind of something either you have or you don't, or maybe you have it certain days and not so much others. You have to wait for some creative idea to come to you. I have heard, the sort of stereotypical at this point quotes about writers scheduling time to write, or, that you can schedule time to be creative instead of waiting, but it still kind of feels like this limited resource that you kind of have or you don't. But from researching it lately, I'm kind of finding that there are some more concrete ways to access creativity, and it's somewhat formulaic in a lot of ways. It's so interesting. So it might feel to you like, well, I just want the cold hard facts of tell me what to do, not be more creative. If I could be more creative, I already would have been. But I think there are ways that you can learn to be more creative in kind of a predictable way.
Yeah, something that I mentioned, I've been consuming a lot of content. We both have, I think, just about these ideas in general. And something that multiple creators have said is just they've talked about this idea of creating for an outcome, and how, like on YouTube, especially right now, you put out a video and you want to know how good it's doing, right? You want to look at the numbers and see, okay, how is this working in comparison to my other videos? How's my thumbnail? How's my title? What's the retention on my video? It's all very outcome based. It's like, I'm going to make this creative piece, which I would say every video we create, whether it's education or entertainment or connection, it's all very creative at the end of the day. It really is. Over the past few years, as YouTube becomes more of like like a business opportunity for people, like people are seeing it more than ever as a legitimate potential career.
Yeah.
And as that shift has happened, the need for good outcomes or high performing videos is more than ever, right? Yeah. Creators' livelihoods are resting on videos performing well. We went to Vid Summit last year, and one of the creators talked about the huge team that they had. And so every video had to hit a certain threshold views-wise in order for them to pay their team. And so all of a sudden, we are posed with this dilemma. It's like, I feel like I need to, perform in a certain way, like views wise or retention wise, so that I can live, or so that the people working for me can live. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's really cool to work in in creative positions like that, but it feels limiting. It feels like all of a sudden you're in this box and only certain ideas can work, and you have to stick to this very regimented process that's historically proven. And all of a sudden it's just like, there are so many things that you potentially could have done that just, if it's outside of what feels comfortable, you just probably won't do it.
I remember at Vid Summit, if the energy was mostly positive. I mean, people were so nice to each other, so supportive, a lot of networking, but it felt a little tense to me. I don't know if you felt that or not.
I think it all felt very businessy.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what it is. It was not, I mean, and I guess it makes sense. Like, it's people who were gathering, thousands of people who were gathering to improve themselves on YouTube, like to improve performance. I mean, that's partially why I was there anyway, to like, what are we going to learn about that creators are doing that's working on YouTube?
Needs to work, yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, I think I totally felt that.
Right, which is like completely different. Even using the word what's going to work is like the complete opposite side of the coin of raw creativity.
Right.
Of, what kind of art do I want to create just so that it exists in the world, whether people like it or not, what is going to work. And yeah, around YouTube, like 90% of everybody, I feel like at this point, or at least people at something like Vid Summit, they're thinking about what is going to work. And the solution isn't just to not care about money or making a living off of it. Tons of people want to do this as a full-time job. I mean, we have an entire course about how to make it lucrative enough that it can be your full-time job. We understand that. We also are working on our own channels so that we can have, more of a side income. Would I be doing my personal channel if there were no money involved? Probably not.
Right.
So we understand, but it's just interesting how it feels like that doesn't always work as well, even in the technical sense of working. I've been reading some studies lately. They don't have everything figured out yet, which was surprising because I've read some books that made it sound really black and white. Like, we know that, monetary rewards stunt creativity. Well, that's been proven pretty well in children, but for adults, it's like kind of all over the place. And so there is a lot of conflicting information with these studies, but from what I've been able to piece together, there are some pretty strong theories at this point. One of them is that social recognition rewards. So like, if, for the examples I read was like, if your boss throws you a party or like internet approval, things like that, that would typically stunt creativity, which is crazy. So they're saying that because you are trying to fit some kind of, you're already looking for social approval, that kind of activates the part of your brain that's thinking about social approval, which is usually also kind of trained to not go too far out of the norm. It's trained to follow social norms, which is going to stunt creativity a bit. Monetary rewards can do the opposite, but it seemed very specific to me, and there were some conflicting studies, but it seemed like if you are in a big pool of people and there's a monetary reward, like maybe you're trying to win some prize, well, then that can increase creativity because people are trying to stand out. They know they have to stand out. However, when maybe you're like a famous writer or you've already created something wonderful in the past, and then your next book or your next piece of art, whatever you're creating, often tends to be worse when they're thinking too much about the money. And I think that's where the term like sell out is so common. And they aren't necessarily just thinking about the money. I think they're trying to create something good. But at that point, they probably do. They have so much social recognition, reputation to uphold. And so at that point, they don't want to go outside the box again. Another thing is that monetary rewards can absolutely stunt your motivation. I think that is, I'll link all the studies that I read, but I think that is probably the most confirmed of these so far, is that scientists are pretty darn sure that money can really hurt your motivation, that people will stop doing things that they used to enjoy because they start getting paid for it, which is wild. I think you just have to be careful with these things and keep coming back to the content you want to create as much as possible. Yes, there is a line there where if you're just making a video about what you had for breakfast, probably no one's going to care unless you're a top chef. But as much as you can, when you have the option, when you think which of these two videos is going to work, it might be the one you're more excited about. Yeah,
and I think that's you made just a couple good points there. When it comes to creating something that you like or something that you want to create, I think there are definitely some guardrails that should be in place. Because I think
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier, we tend to think of these things kind of in a black and white sort of way. It's like I can either be analytical or I could be creative, you know? And I feel like there's, like you mentioned, there's got to be a middle ground there. And I think the middle ground would look like exactly what you said. I have these few video ideas. I think this one will do really well based on, you know, I've done a video very similar to that. It did really well. The audience really liked it. But I just did the video like that, but I really want to try this one. It's unproven. I'm not sure, but I have a good feeling about it.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a huge decision. It's just, I think this one's maybe a little more proven. There's data behind it. This is the one that I'm a little more interested in, and I have a good feeling about it. Like, that's a very simple but very practical example of what this might look like. And then choosing the one that you just have a good feeling about, because I think, like, as we walk down that road of the one that you have a good feeling about, you're more likely to be engaged in the creative process. If it's the one where you're saying, oh, I think it'll work based on historical data, it's like, okay, I just need to pump another one out.
Yeah.
Whereas the one that you're just super excited about, you're more likely to put better work into it. I listened to an interview, I've mentioned it a couple times. It was Colin and Samir interviewing Dan Mace, one of Mr. Beast's, I think it was producer on the Beast Philanthropy channel. And he talked about the work that he creates when he was financially motivated to create a specific video. He said he just struggled every single time, but it was when there was no motivation other than, I just want to do this for me. He said he ended up creating stuff that he was much more proud of.
Wow.
And that ended up working well with the audience that he was creating it for. So I really feel like there's something there. We don't have to totally be driven by the analytics, but we don't also have to let it totally fall to the side.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a big part of it too is, you know, maybe you have two videos, like you said, that example, where you're really excited about one of them, you have a good feeling about it, and then the other one has kind of been proven to maybe work well, maybe in your industry. You could do both. You don't have to choose, but so much of it is, don't just throw something out just because maybe it feels too frivolous or too, I don't know, like it won't be productive for the monetary impact. You know, try it. See, there's like doing it for you, doing it for your audience, and doing it for rewards, right? And sometimes doing it for your audience is not the same as the rewards. And it doesn't feel like that because you're probably thinking that you already know that, you know, good content will give you more monetary rewards, but it's just, there's a little different. I don't know how to explain it. I'll give an example for my personal channel. I was always making videos that I was hoping would help people and like really trying to think about what would help people the most, but also, you know, what's going to get a click and what thumbnail is going to work well, what's going to be engaging, until one day I decided to pivot my channel. So I made a video about the old topic I was doing, same topic I was doing, and it took off. It got like 35,000 views, way more than most of my videos. This was years ago, before I even worked here. And that whole video, like, I just didn't care if anybody saw it. I wanted it to be available as a resource, but the whole idea was like, I'm just going to give as much information as possible at this topic because I'm done doing it. I'm switching to a different topic. And I just genuinely wanted people to have some place to go so they could like get all their questions answered and just, you know, have this resource for after I pivoted. And so that was purely for the audience. I didn't expect it to do anything. I didn't even put much work into making it look polished, and it did so much better than all my other videos. So I was always making videos for my audience, but I don't think it's such a raw, pure level of just like, they need this.
Right.
That's interesting to me.
Yeah, that is really interesting. We listened to a podcast. I honestly don't even know who the interviewer was or who the interview was. Maybe you could give them their names.
Yes, it is Jay Klaus and Dr. K.
Yeah.
He just goes by Dr. K.
So they had a really good conversation that I feel like tied into this. They were really talking about creator burnout overarchingly, but they talked about reasons for creating. And one of the things that they talked about in their discussion was one of the ways that creators can just be a little easier on themselves. And so part of the discussion was talking about how we respond to our content when we put it out. And the doctor, he said, when we create a good piece of content, we just oftentimes will attribute it to luck. We put out a good video and it's like, wow, the algorithm took off and it just happened to work really well. And it's hard because it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it was. There's so many things that go into it. But then when we put out a piece of content that's bad, we oftentimes say, man, I wish I could have done better.
Yeah.
Like, what did I do wrong? How can I improve? And we put the blame on ourselves. So anyway, I just thought that was a really interesting thing where when something good happens, we rarely fully take credit for it. But when something bad happens, we nearly always want to take credit for it. And I think that that's the creative side of us. I think the creative side of us says, okay, I put out a piece of work and nobody liked it. And that reflects directly on us. It feels like it does. But when we do something good or, a video takes off, we are maybe a little, shy or humble about you. Like you feel like it was probably something out of your power that made it do that.
I think one reason for that is because when something works, it's so rare that you know for sure something's going to work.
Yep.
Sometimes you feel really good about stuff. But I think more often it's just like, well, I think this is pretty good. Maybe everything seems more similar to you when it goes out. And then you're like, well, I'll just have to see what happens. And so if you didn't call it, I think it feels like an accident. Yep. And then it feels like luck. And especially because however the idea came to you, it came from past experiences and books you read and work you've put in and time you've spent being creative and learning to be creative. But those are all just kind of floating around in your subconscious. And it kind of feels like luck when a good idea comes to you. And so, I think it's hard to take credit for it.
Yeah. That was kind of like the lowest level, but he said a lot of creators find themselves there. Yeah. So he said a way to level that up would be to say, okay, if I'm going to attribute the failure to myself, I should at least attribute the success to myself. So that at least it's equal, right? Yeah. You're saying, okay, the failure was my fault. I take responsibility for that. But then also saying, if your video takes off and it does well, take responsibility for that. Say, yes, the things that I did, the steps that I took were what made this video take off and do well. And that was kind of like the mid-tier, the next step of being a little easier on yourself and allowing yourself to be a little more creative. And then he said the final and the highest tier of how to approach this would be to not take responsibility for the successes and then not to take responsibility for the failures, which from a creative perspective, I think is really interesting because when you don't take responsibility for the success and you don't take responsibility for the failure, you are left with, I create because I like to create. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a very freeing place to be, I would imagine. I don't feel like I've ever been there fully, to be completely honest, but just before we started recording, I made a comment that it seems like we run into people occasionally who are like, I'm not a data person. I rarely log into my YouTube Studio app. I don't really know what's going on. I just post the videos. And I said, they always seem happier. They always seem like it just doesn't matter. They're just creating. And maybe that's easy to say because a lot of times those people are on the successful side. Mm-hmm. I think there are a lot of unsuccessful people who maybe aren't data people too. But when a successful person comes up and says, I'm not really a data person, and it's just working, you just go, man, why? How does that work? Right. But it feels like the ideal place to be. I would love to be able to create on any of the channels that I'm a part of and say, you know what? I'm just going to do it because I like it.
Does not looking at the data make them more successful? Maybe not. That could be confirmation bias, or frequency bias. But if you see that they're happier, like I have seen the same thing. They do seem happier. Yeah. And so of the successful people, some of them look at the analytics, some of them don't. And the ones that don't, from our experience, seem to be happier. Mm-hmm. Those kinds of people, they focus less on the analytics and they do seem to look at everything through the lens of the community. Like I've even noticed sometimes they're just doing what they want to do and they don't care who likes it. They can leave or stay, whatever. But a lot of times they will still make a decision that maybe is not exactly what they would want to do, but they're thinking, well, no, I don't want to do that to my audience, or I don't think my audience would like that. Right. But that's very different than looking at charts on YouTube. Right.
So I would say, are fairly analytical. Yeah. For the most part. I think you are probably even way more than I am. I like looking at the data. For me, maybe it's like more for funsies. Yeah. I don't know if I'm super good at crunching it all and making conclusions, but it would be really interesting to see on channel makers if we were not allowed to log in to the back end for a month. And all we could do is come up with the video ideas and say, you know what, here are the 4 to 8 videos we're going to create. And then we could have Cody or whatever, do all the uploading, all the scheduling, and we are literally not allowed to log in. I mean, we'd still be able to see view counts.
What if we weren't? What if we stopped ourselves from that too?
Not allowed to look at
we don't even know if it got 2 views or...
That would be a really interesting thing to do because I think we are very driven by the analytics. Even just this morning, we made a thumbnail switch because our click-through rate wasn't as high as we would have liked it to be. And it worked. Like, we made the switch and it kind of worked. So
kind of. It went from 3.9 to 10.1 last time I checked.
It was quite a big, like a significant difference. But I just wonder, would we be happier over the course of that month? And would we see a significant difference?
Yeah. Maybe that would be like a mental health break experiment. Like, we still work the same hours.
Right.
But we test out that aspect. And yeah, that interview with Dr. K, I believe it was that one. I did consume some of his content after listening to that interview because he sounded really smart. But I'm pretty sure it was from that specific interview that he talked about how much humans are affected by negative feedback of any kind. It just like spikes your cortisol and makes you stressed out, and it feels like danger. And so you can get 200 positive comments and 2 negative ones, and they will affect you way more.
Yep.
Than the positive ones. Maybe when people think they need a mental health break, they don't need a mental health break from their creativity and from making videos. Maybe what they really need a mental health break is from reading comments.
Right. Yeah. One of the notes that I took when I watched that video was just 3 words. Yes, 3 words. Expectations cause burnout. And I think that again, really speaks to this idea of analytical versus creative. When you think of an artist who just creates and their art stays in their house and no one's ever seen what they've done, they create for the passion. They create out of the interest and the love of the craft. I would say very few YouTubers purely do that.
Yeah.
Just because, people are here to either gain traction for, they're trying to platform themselves. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but it just leads you to change the way you create. And it kind of rewires the way that we view success. The more we can avoid expectations for the outcomes of our videos, probably the better they do, or at least the better we do, probably physically, mentally, and emotionally. And I would imagine the content would reflect that as well.
Wow. It makes me want to try the experiment.
Yeah.
I don't know how.
We should probably do that.
Yeah. It's funny because as you're saying that, I'm feeling like, well, we changed this thumbnail a few hours ago and the click-through rate skyrocketed. Right. It's still 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
Maybe because it didn't get an initial boost because the thumbnail wasn't great initially. All the analytics fuel the expectation. So, waking up this morning, I had the expectation that it would be higher than 8 out of 10. It wasn't.
Right.
Okay, well, what do we got to do? We got to switch the thumbnail. That worked. That was a good call.
Right.
But then you see, it's up to 10% click-through. We're good. It's going to go up now. Still 8 out of 10.
Right.
And then, how do you feel at the end of the day?
Right.
Not great.
I feel better that it's a 10% rather than a 2 or 3%. But like the reality is, it didn't change much big picture. Like, it didn't make the video go to 1 out of 10.
Right.
Like we would have hoped. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit and get your take on something. YouTube itself, I think, fuels this shift from creativity to a very analytical approach. And it's just simply the way that everything's set up on the back end of YouTube. And anyone who knows the back end of YouTube would probably agree. You log into the back end of your YouTube channel, you go to the studio, and you're automatically confronted with your about last 10 videos and how they rank with views. I think specifically views. It's just like 1 out of 10, or 1 through 10. How did your videos do? And then there's other high-level analytics like what are your top-performing videos in the last 28 days and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
How do we get away from that? Because anytime you go there, you're automatically shown all these potential failures. Like, if your video isn't, for me, it's probably like, if it's a 1 or 2 or 3 out of 10, I'm pretty happy. If it's anything other than that, it feels like a failure. So how do creators get away from that with so much data being thrown at them every time they log in?
I think one trick is to look more at sort of long-term trends than video per video. Video per video is very much like lottery behavior.
Right.
I mean, you open up your phone after you publish a video and you're looking at that 1 through 10 and it's, I hesitate to say random. It's not truly random, but psychologically for us it is, because we don't know how well a video is going to do most of the time.
Right.
If we knew, we wouldn't be checking it. And so we're checking it. We're looking for that confetti. It's like, it's designed to do that to you.
I love the confetti.
Yeah. And not only that, but like it can change hour to hour. It's not just right after upload or a week after. It's hour to hour. You can just kind of play that lottery and see how'd it go. Okay. And then after you've done that and it levels out, you publish another video and it starts all over again. So I think just checking less and looking for trends overall, because you don't want to just ignore completely what's going well on your channel. But I think it's more effective to look the past 3 months and see what kind of videos did well, what kind of comments, especially if you're able to focus on like real comments. I think it's good because it shows what your community is appreciating. It gives you more abstract feedback than just good, bad. You know, after every video, like some people love it, some people don't. We just published one where Cody, our editor, and I did not like it. We were like, we should throw this out. I don't think it's high enough quality. And Nathan said, okay, well, it's like my favorite one that we've done a really long time. So up to you guys.
Yeah.
And we're like, Nathan and Cody both individually asked me, like, is the other one joking? There's that much of a difference of opinion.
Yep.
Okay. The video was 1 out of 10. Nathan was right. It was amazing. But like, you just don't know. And so looking at the feedback from the comments can really help you, I think, figure out what's helping your audience, what your audience appreciates, without just obsessing over numbers. Because maybe even if the video hadn't done well, maybe it was 8 out of 10, but we got like way more comments and those people became way more loyal to our channel and to the brand and just, you know, more of our tribe. Then was it worth it? Yeah.
Right.
It happened to be 1 out of 10, but I think, looking at kind of the big picture of which videos are doing well, which thumbnails do I like over time, instead of obsessing on a video per video basis. Yeah. Which I think Dr. K mentioned too.
Yeah. There's another video that I just recently watched. I don't remember the name of the creator, but she talked about a very similar thing. Like, different videos can serve different purposes, and that's an okay thing.
Yeah.
Some of the videos we can hope and imagine that they'll be good for finding new audience, but then there will be some that are better for the community building and better for like other aspects of a brand. And I think having some of those expectations built in, like even if this video didn't take off, looking at the comments and saying, okay, there were people who were really helped by this, that can maybe help boost us up a little bit, even if we're not feeling great about the overall performance of the video.
Yeah. And looking at different aspects too. So, you know, maybe you're noticing your retention's bad, and maybe a video has really good quick cuts, but the intro's bad, or vice versa.
Yeah.
Or the intro was great and held retention, but then later on people dropped off. Well, instead of saying, okay, this video was bad because I messed up the intro, I should have known better, just work on your intros a bit.
Right.
Like just pick a aspect, just like with anything. You're playing an instrument, like maybe you realize you need to work on your scales a bit, or your hand position, or your sight reading. And that doesn't mean the last song you played is terrible, or the last rehearsal you did was awful. Like, it's just one thing you're going to work on. Yeah. And that's kind of separate from like, did the video pass or fail?
That's a really good point. So in high school and after high school, I guess, I've done a lot of choir, like musical performance. And it is so common, like when you're rehearsing, and you probably doing piano probably have experienced the same thing. You're performing, you make a single mistake. And to you, like, you know, you get red in the face, it's embarrassing. And to you, that destroyed the performance. Yeah. When in reality, most people listening, they either heard it and immediately forgot, or they didn't even notice. And I think the didn't even notice crowd is always so much bigger than you realize.
So true.
It's amazing to me, but it makes sense with, you know, to many people in the audience who have untrained musical ear, they will not hear the mistake. You know, if we go back and listen to a recording of a choir singing, I could pick out and say, yikes, you know, they missed that chord, or someone came in a little early there, or, oh, they weren't they were breathing in unison, not asynchronously. Like, I could pick those things out, but most people are not going to know.
Yeah.
And so when we create a YouTube video, I think it's the same thing. Like, my joke didn't land quite how I wanted, or the cut didn't look good, or my music was a little too loud. It's like, this is art, right? This is something that most people aren't going to pick apart the way you have, because their involvement in it is way less than your involvement in it.
Right. And it's dangerous too, because if you focus too much on those little tiny things that maybe people didn't notice, you can get something wrong. And then you can overcorrect and make decisions in the future for your channel that are so based on that. Like, maybe you think that it was the editing or the intro, when really it was the idea, that like nobody cared about the idea.
Right.
Or the thumbnail. Maybe you think, okay, my thumbnail and title weren't good. Like, the whole idea for the video, there would be no good thumbnail and title because people don't really care about that idea.
Right.
Well, if you misattribute the low views and the low ranking or whatever, then you're going to make the wrong choices.
Yeah. There was one piece of data I think maybe you shared with me. It was that it was something about 100 subscribers. Like the percentage of channels that get more than 100 subscribers is it's small in comparison to the total number of YouTubers.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact number, but anyway, the whole idea is that you as a creator, even on small channels, I think specifically, if you're over analyzing your data with, especially after 1,000 subscribers, your data is only telling a very small story, and it's so easy to get hung up on. I was just looking at my own YouTube Studio app on my phone. It's in like the top 3 apps on my, like, usage wise on my phone, right around my social media apps. You know, I'm going to be honest with you guys. Like, my social media apps are like the highest. I know. My Facebook's like up there at the top, but then YouTube Studio is like top 2 or 3 all the time because I'm always in it. But I'm looking at typically my small channel, and it's just like I could probably spend way less time, just like poring over these analytics that are really only a couple hundred people worth of analytics. So it's just not telling the full story. And there's probably been times where we misattribute something and we make the mistake of making a change that just didn't need to happen. And then maybe we stunt growth further just because we thought we knew what was right.
Right. So as far as the subscribers, which I did want to mention, I don't have the 100 subscribers here, but I wrote down a bunch of other numbers. And I'm mentioning this not to make it feel impossible, because it's not impossible. We've gotten channels like recently to monetized in just a few months. Yeah. So it's like, it can be done, but this is so that you don't be too hard on yourself. Less than 1,800 channels worldwide have 10 million subs, which is kind of surprising. It sounds like a lot. Less than 55,000 worldwide have 1 million subs. Less than 65,000 have 100,000 subs. That's 1% of YouTubers have 100,000. I was surprised that the difference between 1 million and 100,000 is so small.
Right.
That was really interesting.
That is interesting.
Only 8.86% have 1,000, and only 6% are monetized.
Wow.
And I think the monetization number is a lot more accurate because, sometimes people get the subscribers, they just can't get that watch time. But also, I think that 8.8 is really counting channels that have been around for like 10 years. Right. And over time, they get 1 view per month or per week. And so it slowly ticks up. So 6% is probably like more realistic for channels that, somewhat reasonable time frame get 1,000 subscribers by being consistent.
Yeah.
It's very small. So if you are even halfway there, you should be really proud of yourself. I think you should challenge the belief of it's not working. 6% isn't a lot. So maybe it is.
Yeah.
Maybe you just need more time, or maybe you just need small tweaks instead of completely throwing out your niche. I've been there where I overcorrect because I get impatient. I'm like, this isn't working. We got to change things. I do that here too, but it's not always the case.
Yeah. I think that when you're small and you're looking to improve, probably focusing a little less on the analytics is good, but you should be looking to improve YouTube focused skills. Yeah. I think that could make a really big difference. So, if you're a small creator and you're making videos that you love and you feel creative, great. How is your audio? How's your video? How is your editing? Like those things they're less analytical focused, I guess, but they're important skills. Like when someone comes to a channel, if the audio is all crackly and I can't understand what you're saying, I'm probably going to leave. So improving something like that is going to help you have more success, but you don't really need analytics to tell you your audio is bad. You could go listen to other popular YouTubers and say, okay, their audio sounds like this. Mine sounds like this. Or my video looks like this. It's a little grainy and hazy. Theirs looks really clear. What can I do to get a little bit closer? And I think by making those sort of adjustments, or even other things like, my topics are kind of all over the place, but most channels seem to have, one sort of consistent topic with maybe a few random videos. So maybe I need to make my videos a little more consistent than they are. Making little tweaks like that are just more common sense tweaks, I think will make a big difference for a small YouTuber, rather than saying, okay, this video got 6 views. My click-through rate was 4%. How can I improve that? It's just like, you got 6 views, make another video.
Yeah, definitely. It's so easy to get caught up in like, I just need a video to go viral.
Right.
So we've all seen some pretty like low produced videos that have done really well. And if the audio is bad on all your videos, but you've had a couple that like did pretty well, or at least comparatively, then I think people do tend to over focus on the ideas and maybe the title and thumbnail. And they're like, I just need to get people to click. And maybe they kind of know their audio is bad. Let's say you fix your audio and then the next video didn't do as well as some of your past ones in the last, say you made 60 videos, you had 2 that did really well, and then you fix your audio and the next one doesn't do great. Well, long-term, like that's going to help so much. Yeah. It really will. It'll make a more loyal audience. When you do have really good video, it will do even better. But if you're just focused on the videos that do well, then you're like, oh, well, that doesn't really matter. People don't really care about production quality.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is the key to all this is make videos that you're proud of and try to get better, but don't obsess over what worked and what didn't.
General takeaways, actionable. We've been talking about a few actionable things.
Yeah.
Right now, month of March, we are doing something we call the Content Warrior Challenge. Maybe you could tell everyone a little bit about that, because I feel like that is a very actionable way to approach this whole topic.
Yeah.
I know that I have some experiences to share. Even so far, we're like, 4 or 5 days in now. I already have some things to share, but what are your thoughts about like actionable ways related to that?
In the beginning, if you're overthinking, I think getting more content out is really helpful.
Yeah.
And the Content Warrior Challenge can be great for that. It's something we do in our private community of people that are members of Project 24, but anyone could do it. But if you're in the community, it's really fun because people, comment, support each other, and we got a whole spreadsheet and a badge you win if you complete it. But the idea is to publish 30 videos in 1 month. It's really hard, and we usually just do recording only. If you wanted to edit your videos, you could make that decision on your own, but it's a lot to record and edit a video every day. But yeah, people just go crazy for the month of March. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. But I know for me, one thing I did just over this past weekend, I did not do a very good job preparing for the challenge. But one thing that I needed to do was come up with just a list of ideas. And as I was brainstorming ideas, I thought, okay, I had already had some kind of preconceived ideas that I wanted to do. So I noted all those down. But then I was thinking, man, what am I going to do? I got to make 30 videos. I got to do all this. It really made me think outside of the box a little bit. Things not, some things that I could do within a very specific time period, or a little bit of a shorter time period, but there are some ideas, just some kind of new avenues that I sort of explored as I came up with some video topics, a little bit creative on the editing side. Maybe some videos have a little less editing, some have a little bit more, but I feel like what you said is key. Publishing a little bit more can be really, really helpful. The whole iteration of working through the entire video process, start to finish, I know has helped me so much in my creation and just feeling really confident in what I'm doing. I don't plan to publish 30 videos on my channel in this month, but I am going to prepare a lot of videos to publish. And I think I'm going to increase the publishing schedule maybe from once a week to twice a week. And then all the rest of the stuff that I'm creating, I can just kind of drip out later on, so that my audience isn't totally overwhelmed by a ton of content. I'm not messing up my channel. I'm not doing anything that's going to hurt the channel, but I'm getting all the benefit of working through the process. And for me, I'm really focused on the creativity aspect this time around, not just pumping stuff out just to get it out. I'm really trying to maintain my vision for the channel, and it's a little bit more challenging, but it's been really interesting to see some of the ideas I've come up with, and I'm excited about some of them. And I'm just going to see what happens and not worry too much about the performance of the videos, because they're extra. They kind of feel like an extra chance that I'm giving myself to create something good.
Right. There's so much time here to kind of think outside the box and try things you normally wouldn't, because if you're doing 1 video a week, it could feel like you have to maintain the status quo. But if you're doing 5 or 7, then suddenly like, okay, well, I'll try one that maintains my status quo. I'll try one that's just a video I really want to make for funsies. I'll try one that I think people really need. I'll try one that people ask a lot of questions about, but it seems obvious to me. You can try all these things and say, oh, maybe all the ones where people will have questions are working really well. Yeah. Or you just get your creative process figured out. It's a big part of creativity. Is it's not about waiting for an idea to come, and it's not necessarily about forcing it. It's about this in between where you learn through trial and error what process gets you to come up with a creative idea. Yeah. Like for us, we found a lot of times if we look and we say like, what video do we wish existed? Like, what do we feel like the other videos on YouTube are just missing about this? We often come up with some pretty cool ideas. For myself, I've noticed like in the morning after some coffee, I am more creative. Maybe my brain's a little calmer than after the rush of the day. Yeah, just things like that. If you're going to learn so much about yourself if you do 30 videos for 30 days. Yeah.
One of the most, I'd say, creative people, someone who's just very good at the creative process. One thing that they said to me that really stood out was they didn't just happen upon being good at creativity. It was something that they studied and practiced over and over and over. And the biggest thing that they said they would do is they just listened for the creativity. There are so many times where we get caught up in all the technical aspects and we just forget to listen. And so one thing that they recommended was just having a space to put your creative ideas. Even if it was something that you weren't going to do right now, even if it wasn't completely relevant to your channel, just have a place to note all of your creative thoughts and ideas. And they said throughout the day, they had a note on their phone, and they would just pull it out, note something down. And then when they felt like they were kind of in a creative dry spell, they could go to that place and they could use that to sort of reignite their creativity and say, oh, I forgot I had this idea. That sounds so cool. How could I tweak that or make that work here? And it was just this whole keeping track of all of these thoughts and ideas. Another person who I've just seen on social media, I honestly have no idea who they are. They talked about storytelling and how to be a good storyteller. And their whole concept or idea was that nobody is born to be a good storyteller. Nobody, not only specific people have great stories. You think of a good storyteller, they always have these amazing life stories to tell. And he said the reason why he felt he had become a good storyteller was because he just noted down things that happened in his life, things that even seemed a little bit meaningless at the time. They would just note stuff down and journal it. And so they always had this huge, I don't know what a better word is, like bucket of ideas and thoughts and stories to pull from that were just relevant to any number of things they were talking about. It just makes me think like that's probably the same process for creativity. We just need to be filling those buckets full of creative ideas, and eventually we'll get to a place where we feel confident in our creative abilities. We feel confident in our gut feeling, I think this one's going to be good. If you don't exercise that, you're not going to trust that feeling.
Right. I love how actionable those are. Just very practical, very actionable. I recently listened to an episode on creativity on the Huberman Lab podcast. He has one solo episode and one where he interviews a guest. The one I was listening to was his solo episode. It was a little older, like a year older. I'm going to listen to the other one too. He actually had some interesting exercises too for practicing creativity. Probably a little less practical. Like they were kind of more just, remind me of exercises that you can actually use what you did, like the example you gave with the notes, you can go back and actually use that. His were kind of like, look at a pen and just practice thinking about what relates to a pen, weird things like that. But if you're looking for practical, it's still somewhat practical. It's still like, hopefully going to stretch that muscle instead of sitting around and hoping like you might have been doing in the past. So yeah, awesome. Check out Project 24 if you are interested in the challenge. It's a paid community, but you can also do it on your own, and we'll be rooting for you. Maybe we'll do a community post and let us know if you're doing it on your own. And let us know any ways that you have thought of for being creative, what your creative process looks like. I'd be really curious to hear about that. And thanks for listening. Anything else?
I don't think so.
All right.
Get creative.
Get creative.